That was one of my father's favorite hymns. He was a bird watcher, and so he was in tune with how all of nature joins in manifold witness to God's great faithfulness, mercy, and love. As the children sang earlier in the service, human voices are not the only voices in the choir. All creation sings. But there are fewer critters in the choir than there used to be. In the last issue of Science magazine, published on October 4th, which also happens to be the feast of that famous bird watcher, St. Francis, researchers who've been tracking bird populations since 1970 estimate that there has been a net loss of 3 billion birds in North America in the past 25 years. That's almost 30% of the entire bird population. 3 billion less birds. That number is staggering. 30% fewer sparrows, warblers, and blackbirds that my dad used to watch through his binoculars. Now, the causes for this loss are multiple, but they can be traced back, of course, to us. Insecticides, pesticides. How could we not expect that our use of them would affect the birds who eat insects? A massive agricultural monoculture, planting mile upon mile of corn and soybeans to feed cattle and pigs and chickens. Blackbird has lost her nesting habitat so that we can feed our appetite for meat. Morning is broken like the first morning, but Blackbird isn't speaking as much as she used to. So creation waits, and creation groans, and creation hopes with eager longing for the children of God to be revealed. Birds were in other news this past week. Does anyone here ride the Blue Line regularly from the Irving Park CTA station? Not many, but you'll know that there is a problem there if you do. An overabundance of birds, pigeons in particular. They are leaving a mess under the viaduct of the Kennedy Express where they perch and do what they do. Alderman Andrade, the local alderman, has gotten involved with trying to solve the problem. But something as simple as cleaning up bird doo-doo gets complicated when it involves multiple government agencies, the CTA, IDOT, CDOT. But the alderman and the state and local officials are against an even more powerful force than bureaucracy, a 67-year-old woman, a woman named Young Kang. Young is determined to feed the pigeons out of her Christian conviction. Young is a Christian minister, and she has a not-for-profit called the Young Bird Care Society, and she devotes a significant amount of time and money to feeding pigeons. She considers it her calling. She had a sort of conversion experience a while back when she noticed the number of ill and dead pigeons on the sidewalk, and she said, I know there is now no natural food source. Everywhere you go, the condos, I feel like, oh my God, I have to face this. So I start doing it. When she's asked by people about people who don't like the pigeons, she says, selfish. We all have a problem with me, my. And she keeps on feeding the pigeons, even though it's gotten her into big trouble. The Audubon Society has chimed in. It calls our hatred of pigeons misguided and out of proportion to their crimes. And it's a myth that they spread disease. The problem with pigeons is the way that we think about them. Their biggest sin is that pigeons are out of place. We have this idea that the environments that we build, like CTA stations or highway underpasses, that those are separate from natural environments. We want to create a clean, orderly space of civilization that's separate from the wild and uncontrollable nature, as if nature were only out there in wild places and not inside our wild and untamed hearts. We don't like weeds, but weeds are just plants that are growing out of place. And we cut those little squares in the sidewalk and we say to the trees, trees, you grow there and only there. Rats at least are discreet. They live underground and out of sight. But pigeons don't care. Pigeons boldly invade the spaces that we expect to be reserved for us. They sit on park benches and perch on top of statues, and they bomb the heads of computers on their way to the L. Despite our war on them, pigeons pay no attention to the artificial boundaries that we set up. And creation waits, creation groans, and creation hopes with eager longing for the children of God to be revealed. Biblical faith consistently affirms what pigeons know, but that humans have forgotten. Human life and animal life are interdependent. In the language we use at our baptism, humanity and the rest of creation are inseparably bound together. So no matter how much we try to fence ourselves off with walls and pesticides and insecticides, pigeons proclaim that we are a part of creation, and creation is a part of us. It's our attempt to live independently from creation that's brought about the suffering not of just birds, but coral reefs, polar bears, and old-growth forests. Now, Paul, of course, had no inkling about global warming or climate change when he wrote about the suffering of creation in today's scripture. But he had seen plenty of ecological destruction caused by humans. In the first century, when Paul lived, wood was the fossil fuel. It fired the furnaces and heated the bathwater of Rome, and the Roman Empire's appetite for wood left behind deforested wastelands around the Mediterranean world. And so Paul writes to that church living in Rome that creation is waiting and longing for human beings to change. Creation is waiting for the children of God to be revealed. Creation waits for us to live as the people that we were always meant to be. We've been talking a lot about hope over the past month. And when we talk about hope, we tend to talk about hope as for human beings, or hope, personal hope for ourselves. And our hopes in Western nations often really aren't hope at all, but just desires. Desires for a comfortable lifestyle that's unsustainable for the planet. Theologian Jürgen Moltmann notes, true hope must be universal. True hope must be universal. If we were to surrender hope for as much as one single creature, God would not be God. There's no hope for humanity that doesn't include hope for the earth. Some of our favorite hymns contain problematic theology that abandons hope for the earth. For example, some glad morning when this life is o'er, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. Most of us know that hymn, and it's a fun hymn to sing, but it doesn't reflect the hope of the Bible. Heaven is not our home. Heaven is God's home. From the beginning of Scripture, when human beings are placed in a garden to take care of it, to the end of the Bible when God comes to dwell among us on earth, the earth is the only home that we have. The earth is the only home that we will ever have. That's what resurrection hope is all about. Christian hope isn't just hope for human beings, it's hope for the world. And the bold hope of the New Testament is that Jesus didn't just come into the world to save sinners like us. Jesus came to save the whole world along with us. Polar bears, porpoises, peacocks, and pigeons. Meanwhile, creation waits, and creation groans, and creation hopes with eager longing for the children of God to be revealed. Sylvia Keesmont is a Canadian theologian, and she calls that groaning of creation a hopeful lament. When we lament, when we're in pain, we cry out in pain, but we're crying out because we expect things can change. We want God to change things for the different. The groaning of creation is a groaning of creation crying out to God for change for this world, and a cry that we, the children of God, will turn around, change direction, and remember her. Remember our true calling to care for creation. So Chicago Sun-Times reporter asked Young Kang, the pigeon lady, about the opposition to her feeding ministry. She also feeds homeless people, by the way. And her answer combines the fiery faith of the biblical prophets with a sort of modern St. Francis. She said, "It's not like since the alderman hates it, I can stop. The birds depend on me. They're waiting for me. I feed them. The alderman tells everyone I'm a criminal. They treat me like a criminal. What is a criminal? Hey, I take care of God's creatures. That's criminal. All my money and energy. If I'm wrong, I still have to do it. I have to save the life. What's wrong with that? If they have to hang me, if they have to kill me, I'm going to die." I don't recall that feeding pigeons is a capital offense. And Young is a bit over the top. But I've got to admire her for her hopeful, determined tenacity. Nothing is going to stop her from caring for God's creatures. In 1973, when I was 10 years old, my family moved from Malacca, Minnesota to Boise, Idaho. And we made the move in our Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. Along with my parents sitting up front, my brother and I were in back. And the car passengers included our 2 family dogs, as well as my brother's cat, a rabbit, a tank of fish, and a couple of parakeets. My brother had a way of accumulating animals. Now, Buttons was the elder of the 2 dogs. She was actually 2 years older than I was. And she was a Chihuahua Toy Terrier, white with brown spots. And she had that regal bearing that small dogs often have, and she had this prominent underbite like Thurston Howell III. And when she got excited to see you, she'd start sneezing through that underbite. So we traveled to Idaho via the northern route across North Dakota and Montana on Interstate 94. Dad consistently ignored our pleas to stop at every tourist trap along that barren stretch of road. But he did acquiesce when we saw the sign in the distance for Pompey's Pillar Historic Site in eastern Montana. We had no idea what Pompey's Pillar was, but we begged him to stop, and he did. Well, after we saw Pompey's Pillar, and if you don't know what it is, please look it up after the service, we had one last stop at the park entrance so Dad could take a family photo next to the Pompey's Pillar sign, as you do. A couple hours later, several miles down the road, Mom looked over the seat and she said, "Is Buttons back there with you?" No, Buttons wasn't back there with us. Buttons wasn't under the seat and she wasn't in the back window. Buttons was not in the car. And in a stab of panic, we realized that we had left her at Pompey's Pillar. With such a menagerie in the car, no one had noticed. We were frantic. Dad turned around the car at the next exit. He hit the gas. With him, that was no problem, but because before the energy crisis, his normal freeway speed was 90. And for the next hour, we asked ourselves, how could this have happened? How could we have forgotten Buttons? Would we ever find her? What if another family, a better family, the kind that doesn't leave dogs along the side of the road? What if they picked her up and gave her a stable home? What if Buttons had embarked on one of those dogs' incredible journeys to find their way home that you see in the theaters every 5 years? We finally got to the exit for Pompey's Pillar. We could see the historic marker down the road, and Dad sped toward it. And then we saw her, this little white dog with brown spots, sitting patiently for several hours under that sign, waiting for us. And when she saw us coming, she ran towards us with her tail wagging and sneezing through her underbite. She ran with exuberant joy. And she had been waiting for us to remember her, to turn around, to change direction. She was waiting with all of creation, hoping with eager longing for the children of God to be revealed.